harm our environment, our biodiversity, or is it likely to any way adversely affect the existing agricultural pattern which goes on in this country? And then comes the issue of, is it safe for both human and animal consumption? And in that safety context, we have three major issues. One is it likely to be toxic? Does a new substance cause any kind of a direct harm to the human beings by consuming them? A second is it likely to cause allergy? Because allergy is a phenomenon, does not affect everybody, but there are a small number of people in the world who don't tolerate certain proteins and they can have allergy, and allergy can be a very serious problem, and therefore we need to look into that aspect. And then were there any unintended effect, in the sense that a genetic transformation is done with a specific purpose, but when you insert one gene or a couple of genes into the genome of the particular host plant, it's quite likely that some of the genes elsewhere could either get disturbed or their expressions could alter and produce certain effects which you didn't intend earlier. So we need to therefore look into these three aspects: is this toxicity, allergenicity, and unintended effect, and how do we go about doing all this. The basic principle and looking at GM crop safety is, we are not doing what is called an absolute safety. Now, if I'm going to look at the safety of genetically modified brinjal, all I need to demonstrate is this brinjal variety in any way different from the brinjal which we have been consuming for centuries? That is all we have to do. There are no further studies need to be done. So as long as I establish that the genetically modified brinjal is as good or as bad as an existing brinjal, which we are all used to eating it, then there's no safety issue at all. It's not unlike a drug. Many people compare this with a drug safety study. The drug is something which is new, and therefore you need to demonstrate a whole lot of safety studies when you're developing a new drug. So the concerns are, is the product of an inserted gene harmful when consumed for humans? And is it likely to cause allergy? And are there any unintended effect? Another thing we need to look at is, has this new protein, for whenever you insert a gene, the gene goes into the host and produces a protein which we never eaten in the past. So if you put a Bt gene inside, you produce a cry protein, which we are not consumed, at least as part of the plant. We have been using as biopesticides, but we have not been consuming the protein as such. And therefore, it's a new protein which we have not eaten, and therefore we need to look for toxicity and allergies. But if there is evidence that people are already consuming this and they are living happily, the risk comes down. That's one of the things we fall back on, is saying that in several countries in the Western world have been consuming foods which already has this gene and the protein, and we don't have any report of any harm coming up. As was mentioned this morning, there's not a single incidence of any kind of a negative effect occurring in people who are consuming this genetically modified foods. So history of safe use is the greatest evidence to say it is safe, will be safe for us also. But nevertheless, we need to do a whole lot of tests, because we are now introgressing these genes into our own hybrids and our own kind of crops which grow in Indian soil, and therefore we regenerate the same kind of safety data. Now, for that we need to understand the basic biology of the gene. We'll take, for example, a Bt gene. When you insert a Bt gene, you produce a Bt protein, which is called the cry protein. Now, what happens to this cry protein? How does it kill the insect? It kills the insect primarily because that particular target insects have got a receptor in the intestine to which this protein will go and bind. And once it binds, it destroys the gut lining of this insect, and thus the insect dies. When a human consumes the same protein, it gets primarily digested in the stomach. And therefore, like any other proteins which we eat, even this so-called toxic protein will not go intact into our intestine. Now, assuming it goes intact into intestine, our intestines and the intestines of many other animals and non-target insects don't have that receptor for that cry protein, and therefore still there is no binding, and that does not affect that particular insect. So that basic biology we should understand. It's not that here is a poisonous substance. In fact, I remember in the campaign, one lady was telling on the television, If an insect is going to die eating this brinjal, what will happen to the human being? You know, it sounds very sensational, but look at the science. These people who are brought out and bring out these statements do not look at science, they look at emotions. The science shows that this protein doesn't have to work in the human beings to cause toxicity. We swallow billions of types of proteins from different sources of fruit, vegetables, etc. That some of them can actually cause harm, but they don't, primarily because most protein gets digested. Occasionally there are 1 and 2 toxic substances. You have seen a case of people, a person dying after eating bottle gourd juice, because bottle gourd has a toxic substance called cucurbitacin, which is a bitter principle, which even a housewife, before she cuts these gourd, actually tastes to see whether bitterness is bitter, they throw it away. So they are naturally present. Therefore, we know that there are several naturally present substances, but not every one of them do any harm, and therefore merely telling a toxic protein is going to be consumed and therefore humans are at risk is only sensationalizing the issue. So we need to understand the basic biology. We then do what is called as an acute toxicity study. There's always a question that if you were to eat brinjal in a regular quantities, you'll be, and assuming the poisonous substance is swallowed in small quantities, nothing may happen. But what if someone takes a large amount of this? And therefore, the developer, what he does is he synthesizes this protein using a bacterial expression system, the toxic protein which is present in large quantities. Otherwise, you can't make a rat eat some tons of brinjal to produce that effect. So you purify and concentrate the poisonous protein and give it directly to the rat and see if anything happens to the rat.